Chapter 98. After being defeated in one move, Yang Shilong and the other two stood at the bottom of the flame hole and looked at Lin Aching in bewilderment, not daring to act rashly. After Lin Aching kept the black stone-like object, he didn't make another move. He just stood at the hole and looked coldly at Yang Shilong and the rest. Only when the flames around the hole became fainter did Lin Aching look at me from afar. Then he turned around expressionlessly and walked into the hole, as though he had calculated it. The moment his figure disappeared, the flames outside the hole also quickly extinguished. When the last wisp of flame disappeared, all that was left in front of us was darkness. The hole from before didn't seem to have appeared at all. At this moment, Yang Shilong and the other two finally recovered. Fang Xing seemed to be unwilling to give up as he took 2 steps forward and threw the folding fan in his hand towards where the flame hole was. The folding fan spun a few rounds in the air, but didn't find anything abnormal. The flame hole had completely disappeared. Fang Xing then retreated with a face full of resentment as he muttered to Yang Shilong, "Yangji, what realm is this person at? Why is he so powerful?" Hearing his question, I was curious as well, so I immediately pricked up my ears and prepared to listen to Yang Shilong's answer. Although he was defeated by Lin Aching in one move, Yang Shilong was still the strongest among us, so he definitely understood Lin Aching's strength better. But who knew that Yang Shilong would frown and think for a long time before saying, "His strength is hard to say. From what I feel, his strength should be at the initial stage of glory of consciousness." What? Initial stage of glory of consciousness? Isn't that about the same as Zhao Yongquan back then? How is that possible? Not only was I shocked, Fang Xing and the usually expressionless Lu Zheng also had faces full of astonishment. Lu Zheng subconsciously said, "That's impossible. Initial stage of glory of consciousness isn't even comparable to me. How could he defeat the 3 of us in one move?" Yang Shilong's frown deepened as he shook his head and said, "The power contained in that weird magic tool he used wasn't strong. It was indeed only at the initial stage of glory of consciousness. But that power was very strange. It didn't seem to be Tao energy, nor was it any yin and yang power. I've never seen it before." With that, Yang Shilong took a few steps forward and picked up the copper coin sword that had fallen to the ground. He held it in his hand and carefully examined it. After a long silence, he continued in a doubtful tone, "I've never seen this kind of power before. It's a little sinister, but it's not exactly the same. It seems to restrain the Tao Qi. The total amount of power is obviously not much, but it easily broke through my 9-coins magic sword. Not only that, after the 9-coin magic sword was damaged, I sent my Qi of the way to the sword body, but I found that the sword body and my Qi of the way did not seem to be compatible." His words startled me. The 9-coin magic sword was Yang Shilong's personal magical weapon. Although I hadn't created my own personal magical weapon, I knew that a geomancer had to spend many years to create it. There was no shortcut. Once it was successfully refined, the personal magic tool would be completely compatible with the Tao Qi of the Feng Shui master and become the exclusive magic tool of the Feng Shui master. No one else could take it away and use it. The reason why it had such a function was that the personal magic tool had been completely assimilated by the Tao Qi of the Feng Shui master. The Tao Qi of every Feng Shui master was different, just like how people's fingerprints were different. The personal magic tool was like a fingerprint lock added by the Feng Shui master. Except for the Feng Shui master, no one could open the lock. But now, the situation that Yang Shilong encountered was that after his personal magic weapon was broken by Lin Aching, he could not unlock it. It was unbelievable and completely overturned my previous understanding. Fang Xing and Lu Zheng were also surprised. Even Yang Shilong couldn't believe it. After saying that, He lowered his head and frowned, thinking. After a while, Yang Shilong concluded this kind of power is too strange and overbearing. It's like the natural enemy of the Tao Qi. I've never seen it before. We must report it immediately. Besides, although we couldn't see anything wrong with the fire hole, it must be related to the true dragon vein, since it appeared here. This is a big deal. We'd better leave this place and contact the headquarters first. Although we had brought communication equipment, there was a strong magnetic field near the true dragon vein. The communication equipment couldn't be used here. We could only get in touch with the outside world after we left this place. After Yang Shilong gave the order, the three of us didn't have any objections. We immediately went back to pack our things. When the sun rose, we set out on the road back. Yang Shilong and the others were full of confidence when they came here, but they didn't expect that it would end like this. Although they were middle-aged people who were shrewd, they couldn't help but be depressed on the way back. On the way back, Fang Xing and the others had tried to use communication equipment to contact the outside world. Unfortunately, there was no signal on their phones until they reached the Yellow Spring River. Even the satellite phone that Yang Shilong had brought with him couldn't be used. Fortunately, we had been calculating the time on the way back. When we arrived at the Yellow Spring River, it was the afternoon of October 14th. There were already corpses floating in the river. We just needed to wait until the floating corpse bridge appeared at night to cross the river. The way back had been smooth until now. As the old saying goes, blessings don't come in pairs, but misfortunes don't come alone. Right after that, something unexpected happened. The four of us rested on the riverbank for a while. When the floating corpse bridge appeared at night, we continued to cross the river. It was different from when we had come here. Today was the 15th of the month. The moon was bright, and it illuminated the floating corpses in the river. The white moonlight shone on the withered corpses' eye sockets, which looked much more terrifying than when we had come here. However, Yang Shilong and the others weren't ordinary people. They wouldn't be frightened by this kind of scene. I also had previous experience, so I wasn't really afraid. However, after the four of us had calmly stepped on the floating corpse bridge, a withered corpse suddenly stood up in the river. It rushed toward Fang Xing, who was walking in the front. Although I had told them that the dried corpses in the river could attack people, Fang Xing wasn't prepared since he hadn't encountered them on his way here, and he was in a hurry to leave. When the dried corpse attacked him, he instinctively used the folding fan magic tool he had been holding the whole time. Because he moved so fast, I didn't have time to react. The folding fan magical weapon carried abundant Tao energy and directly cut open the corpse's head. The corpse fell to the ground, but the Tao energy from the folding fan magical weapon scattered and splashed on the surrounding corpses. When a corpse breathed in qi, it would become a shadow corpse. When it breathed in Tao energy, it would become a real zombie. Almost instantly, 4 black zombies appeared in the air and rushed toward Fang Xing, who was the closest to them. Yang Shilong reacted quickly and yelled, "Defend the enemy! Don't let the Tao energy touch the corpses." Fang Xing also reacted at this time. He put away the folding fan magic tool in his hand and replaced it with a vermilion talisman. He stretched out his hand and fixed the nearest black zombies on the spot. Yang Shilong had also arrived. He also used the talisman that prevented Tao Qi from spilling out to restrain the other 2 black zombies. After he was done, the last black zombie was also taken care of by Lu Zhong. From this, we could see the difference between Zhao Yongquan and these people. They were all in the glory of consciousness realm, but Zhao Yongquan had a hard time dealing with a black zombie. He had even used a paperweight magical weapon in the end. Now, not only Yang Shilong, but even Fang Xing and the others could easily deal with a black zombie. The sudden incident was quickly quelled, and everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Yang Shilong seemed to be dissatisfied with Feng Xing's previous performance and specially reminded him to be careful. While I was still surprised, I suddenly saw a thick golden light around me. Instinctively, I lowered my head and was dumbstruck. It wasn't that the river had dried up, but the golden head at the bottom of the river had risen from under my feet and pushed me out of the river. In other words, I'm standing on top of that golden head. I was so scared that my scalp was about to explode. The golden head was so terrifying, and I was actually standing on it. Originally, I thought that I had managed to escape from death's door. But now, it seems that I'm going to die even more miserably. My face paled, and I didn't dare to move. I didn't even dare to lower my head to look at the golden head. I was so scared that I was waiting for its revenge. However, it was strange that even though I had waited for a long time, I didn't get the revenge that I had imagined. My surroundings were completely silent. When I opened my eyes, I found that my body wasn't still. I was slowly drifting toward the riverbank. Moreover, the golden head's countless hairs had parted into two halves around me, leaving only a small space for me to stand on. Why is the golden head drifting toward the riverbank? Why isn't it hurting me? Did it come out of the river to help me cross the river? It wasn't a coincidence that it pushed me out of the river. Did it purposely save me? As soon as this thought popped up in my head, I denied it immediately. Are you kidding me? I just glanced at the golden head from a distance, and I couldn't bear its pressure. How strong is it? How could it come out of the river to help me cross the river? Before I could figure it out, the golden head had brought me to the riverbank. At first, I didn't dare to move. However, after waiting for a long time and seeing that nothing dangerous had happened, I cautiously tried to stand up. After I stood up, I saw Yang Shilong and the other two standing not far from the riverbank. All of them wore a strange expression as they looked at me blankly. I slowly lifted my legs and moved my body. The golden head was still standing there. It was as quiet as a boat. At this moment, I finally calmed down. However, I didn't dare to move too much. I slowly took small steps and walked down from the golden head's head to the riverbank. When Yang Shilong and the other two saw my movements from afar, their anxious expressions relaxed a little. Instead, they became curious. The three of them discussed for a while before slowly walking toward me. When they came to me, I had already walked down from the golden head. I stood on the riverbank and turned to look at the golden head. When I had seen it before, it was either from afar or standing on its head, so I couldn't tell how big it was. But now I could clearly see that the head was as big as an excavator. However, its facial features were exactly the same as an ordinary person's. I could even see its expression in between its eyebrows. However, the strange thing was that the facial features on the head looked like that of a child. Its eyes were pure and innocent, and the corners of its mouth were slightly lifted, giving it a flattering smile. I suddenly had an unimaginable thought. Although the golden head looked terrifying, it could be just a child. Every time it came out of the river, it was just to help people cross the river. However, because of its terrifying appearance and power, people were scared shitless and didn't give it a chance to cross the river. Although I also thought that this thought was absurd. When I looked at its face from a close distance, the fear in my heart slowly disappeared. I didn't think that the head was terrifying anymore. Instead, I thought that it was cute. With that thought in mind, I subconsciously extended my hand and touched the forehead of the golden head. When it saw my action, its expression didn't change. It still wore a flattering smile, and it even moved its forehead closer to me. It looked very obedient. I heaved a sigh of relief and gently stroked his forehead. At this moment, Yang Shilong and the other two walked next to me. Fang Xing looked at my action and couldn't help but exclaim in disbelief, "Creation is so magical. Such a terrifying thing has a kind heart, and it even knows how to save people." It's so strange. As he said that, he imitated my action and extended his hand to touch the forehead of the golden head. However, right at this moment, the expression on the golden head's face suddenly changed. Its eyes slightly arched, and the corners of its mouth that had been curled up suddenly dropped. The flattering smile on its face disappeared, and one of the strands of hair that was connected to the countless corpses on its head suddenly drooped down. Together with the corpses, it whizzed toward Fang Xing. No one could react to the sudden change. When the strand of hair that was connected to the corpses was about to hit Fang Xing, his hand was still in midair. However, in the next second, the thick strand of hair whizzed past, and Fang Xing's body was directly divided into two parts. The upper part was thrown into the river, while the lower part was still standing upright. After a while, it fell heavily on the ground. Fang Xing's action seemed to have enraged the golden head. After killing Fang Xing, a few more strands of hair whizzed toward Yang Shilong, and the other two. Their reactions were much faster than Fang Xing's. After noticing the signs, they turned around and ran. However, the speed at which the golden head's hair was swinging was much faster than theirs. In just a blink of an eye, it had reached them and reached them. Fortunately, after running for a few steps, they were far away from the golden head. Its hair didn't hit them, but the dried corpse at the top of the hair hit their shoulders and sent them flying. They lay on the ground and struggled for a long time, but they couldn't get up. It floated quietly in front of me. I was stunned for a moment before I reacted. I asked the golden head, "Is this for me?" The golden head still didn't react, but it still didn't take back the pillar. I turned to look behind me. Yang Shilong and the others were standing behind me. Their line of sight was blocked by my body. Moreover, the golden head was emitting a golden light. The green bead wasn't obvious in the golden light. Yang Shilong and the others shouldn't be able to see it. I carefully extended my hand and tried to use my body to block the movement as I received the green bead. I received the green bead and put it in my pocket. The golden head finally turned around. Its body moved slightly and quickly returned to the center of the river. It glanced at me one last time before slowly sinking into the river. After the golden light disappeared, the flying corpses in the air also fell into the river. Some of them floated downstream, while the others sank to the bottom of the river. The river bank gradually calmed down. After a long while, Yang Shilong and Lu Zhengkai returned from afar. Their faces were still filled with fear. After taking a few glances at the river bank, Yang Shilong asked me, still in a state of shock, "That thing left?" I nodded, but didn't say anything. Yang Shilong gently exhaled. Then he asked, "What was that thing? Why was it so kind to you, but directly tried to kill us?" I shook my head and smiled wryly. "I don't know. I only saw it from afar last time. I was almost scared to death when it knocked me out of the river. I thought that I was dead for sure. Who knew that it would end up like this?" Although Yang Shilong and the others found it strange, they obviously didn't think that I would be related to such a terrifying existence. In the end, they could only conclude that this terrifying golden head was temperamental and acted strangely, leaving no traces behind. After chatting for a while, Yang Shilong walked next to the lower half of Fang Xing's body. He stayed silent for a long time before sighing. He turned to the two of us and said, "The upper half of the body fell into the river and can't be found anymore. Let's bury this body first. After we go back and inform his family, we'll find someone to retrieve the body." Since Yang Shilong said so, Lu Zheng and I naturally didn't have any objections. We found a place with soft soil not far from the riverbank and started to dig a hole. At this moment, Yang Shilong and Lu Zheng still had bloodstains on the corners of their mouths. Yang Shilong's left arm was twisted at a strange angle. It looked like it was completely broken. Although the mysterious accumulating curse could adjust the body's condition and suppress the injuries for a short time, it wasn't a miraculous medicine. It couldn't completely heal the injured body. Since the two of them were injured, the task of digging the hole was naturally given to me. I went to find a thick tree branch. After digging for half a day, I was exhausted and could only dig a small hole. I had heard that when a geomancy master reached the glorious knowledge realm, they could recognize the power of the 5 elements and create talismans of the 5 elements. Among them, the earth talismans could easily change the soil, so digging a hole was a piece of cake. Unfortunately, I hadn't reached that level yet. In the end, I could only take out 2 fierce yang talismans and use my Tao energy to guide them. A large amount of violent yang energy exploded on the ground, creating a 1-meter-wide pit. Only then did I bury Feng Xing's corpse. After filling the hole, Yang Shilong went to find a few stones and placed the 6 divine lines on them as a sign. After everything was done, Yang Shilong didn't want to linger. He called me and Lu Zheng to continue our journey through the night. Since it was the 15th of the month, the moonlight was bright after midnight. It wasn't too difficult to travel at night. However, Yang Shilong and Lu Zheng were injured, which affected their speed. After leaving the Yellow Spring River, we walked for around 7 or 8 hours. It was around noon when we finally returned to the Shenangjia scenic area. When we arrived at the scenic area, our phone signal was restored. Yang Shilong quickly reported the situation to the headquarters. He didn't seem to be in a hurry. He didn't urge us to leave. Instead, he arranged for Lu Zheng and me to stay in the hotel to rest. Although I didn't encounter any danger along the way, I was exhausted. When we returned to the hotel room, I slept until nightfall. When I got up, Yang Shilong and the others didn't come to find me. I didn't go out. I sat on the bed and took out the green bead that the golden head had given me. I started to study it. This bead was as big as an egg. It was green, but it wasn't the same as the bright green jade. It was a pale green that didn't make people feel comfortable. I took the bead and gently knocked on the wall. The sound wasn't clear. It didn't look like glass or jade. It felt like plastic. It wasn't soft or hard. It was really strange. After studying it for a long time, I couldn't recognize what this bead was. I didn't know why the golden head had given me such a thing. Feeling helpless, I had to put the bead away. I would deal with it later. After putting the bead away, I took out the jade bracelet. After absorbing part of the dragon vein's energy from the jade bracelet, it had been stabilized for a few days. The dragon energy had turned into my Tao energy. Now, I could absorb it for the second time. Since the Tao energy in my body was close to the gathering Qi as a pillar realm, it would be best for me to wait until I went to the Metaphysics Society's headquarters to observe the true dragon vein. Then I would break through to the dragon summoning realm. However, after reading the words on the red handkerchief, I became more anxious to increase my power. Although I wasn't sure if the red shadow had sent me a message or if I had interpreted it correctly, it was still a thought. I closed my eyes and calmly absorbed the dragon energy from the jade bracelet as I looked forward to the bright future. In just a few minutes, I felt that the dragon energy in my body had reached an exaggerated level. It was very difficult to absorb anymore. I stopped and retrieved the jade bracelet. Then I sat cross-legged on the bed and started to stabilize the dragon energy in my body. After half a night, the Tao energy in my body was so abundant that I could reach the gathering chi as a pillar realm. At this moment, I had only digested half of the dragon energy I had absorbed. After thinking for a while, I didn't dare to break through to the dragon summoning realm. I tried my best to suppress the absorption of the dragon energy in my body. I wanted to disperse the excess dragon energy. However, the Tao energy in my body seemed to have a mind of its own. It greedily absorbed the dragon energy. Only those with poor talent would use this method to improve their chances of winning the dragon chi baptism in the future. However, such feng shui masters usually lost everything in the end and couldn't improve their chances of winning the dragon chi baptism. However, my current situation was different. There was still excess dragon chi in the jade bracelet. It would be a waste if I did not absorb it. Originally, I wanted to absorb all the dragon chi in the jade bracelet. However, after I absorbed the dragon chi in my body, the Tao chi became unstable again. I needed a period of nourishment before I could absorb it again. Looking at the remaining dragon chi in the jade bracelet, I had to give up for now. At this moment, the sky was still bright. Light shone in through the gaps of the curtains, making the room seem even darker. I stretched and jumped off the bed. Although I did not sleep for the entire night, the Tao chi in my body increased. I was at my peak. I walked over to open the curtains and let the sunlight shine on my body. I felt my body brimming with energy. The next step was to find a suitable opportunity to undergo the baptism of the dragon chi. Then, I would be able to officially enter the realm of pressure point. After that, I would work hard to enter the realm of glorious knowledge. Then, the red shadow would keep his promise and appear in front of me again, right? Thinking about this, I couldn't help but smile. At this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door. I was stunned. Yesterday, Yang Shilong said that he was going to rest here for 2 days. Why did he come to find me so early today? I walked over to open the door. What appeared in front of me was neither Yang Shilong nor Lu Zheng. It was a tall beauty in casual clothes. I was stunned for a moment before asking, "Who are you looking for?" This woman looked to be around the same age as me. She was very beautiful, but her lips were thin and her face was expressionless. She looked very cold. Even after hearing my question, she didn't open her mouth to speak and only stared at me. I didn't understand. Even if she was a beauty, wasn't it rude of her to suddenly knock on my door and stare at me without saying a word? Just as I was about to ask again, a cough came from behind the woman. Yang Shilong suddenly walked out with a rare smile on his face. He pointed at the young beauty and said to me, "This is our Metaphysics Association's Miss Yi Pian. She has the same position as me, a vice president. Miss Yi just rushed over from the headquarters this morning to take over my responsibility for the investigation of the true dragon vein." I was stunned. Such a young lady was actually the vice president of the Metaphysics Association, like Yang Shilong. Moreover, from the way Yang Shilong spoke, it was obvious that he was trying to please this young lady. This scene made my eyes widen. However, what made my heart flutter wasn't this, but the lady's name. Vice President Yang and the others are stronger than me, and they've also gone to the site to take a look. You can ask them if they discovered anything. After I said that, Yang Shilong replied, awkwardly, I could only feel that the true dragon's vein was right in front of me. However, I couldn't find any signs of it being hidden. Yi Pian was unmoved. She shook her head and said, "It's normal that it's hard to find out now because the concealing formation has been activated. But before the concealing formation was activated, there must have been something wrong. You didn't tell me." This time, I was a little angry. How could such a beautiful girl be so obstinate and self-opinionated? She didn't even discuss with me and immediately accused me of lying. My expression also turned cold. I said to Yi Piampian, "The reason why I told you about the true dragon's vein was because I wanted to make a contribution to the Metaphysics Association. Does Miss Yi think that it's my duty? If I knew that Miss Yi would interrogate me like this, I wouldn't have told you about it." Seeing that I was angry, Yang Shilong smiled and tried to smooth things over. "Miss Yi is too concerned. Xiao Zhou, don't take it to heart. Miss Yi, don't be too anxious. Let's think of another way." I had to give face to Yang Shilong. Just as I was about to get out of this situation, who knew that Yi Piampian would shake her head expressionlessly. "I'm not concerned. He definitely didn't tell the truth." I was so angry that I was amused. I simply told her, "That's all I know. Miss Yi, it's up to you whether you believe me or not. Anyway, I have nothing else to say." Yang Shilong smiled, helplessly and awkwardly on the side. Yi Piampian was still indifferent. She stood up from the chair and raised her feet as if she was about to leave. However, after taking 2 steps, she turned to look at me and said, "I'll go to the site to check it out. If I find that you're lying, I'll come to find you again." With that, she walked out of the room without hesitation. I curled my lips and didn't want to talk to her anymore. However, when I recalled the horrors of the underworld river and the Valley of Ghosts, I couldn't help but remind her, "If you want to go, you'd better ask Uncle Yang to accompany you. It won't be an easy journey." Hearing that, Yi Piampian stopped and turned to look at me strangely. Then she said seriously, "I'll be responsible for my own safety." Then she didn't bother with me anymore and left on her own. I was so angry that I almost slapped my mouth. That woman was so arrogant that her eyes were staring at the sky. Why did I say that? After Yi Piampian left, Yang Shilong awkwardly explained to me that Yi Piampian was a straightforward person and that her words would offend people easily. He asked me not to mind her and said that she was a good girl. Except for her beauty, I didn't find anything good about her. Of course, I didn't tell Yang Shilong about it. Chapter 103. Barking Like a Dog. As soon as Dai Nanzhou said that, I furrowed my brows. If a person barked like a dog, they either had a mental problem or were possessed by a dog. There were often legends about cats and dogs possessing a person, but in reality, it was almost impossible for such a thing to happen. Animals were different from humans. Humans had 3 souls, and after they died, they would form a yin soul. Animals only had 2 souls, and ordinary animals couldn't form a yin soul. Only the snake spirit, which had cultivated successfully when it was alive, could create a natal soul. After it died, its consciousness wouldn't scatter, and it would form a spirit. Moreover, the cultivation of animals required the accumulation of countless years. Species with short lifespans like cats and dogs had almost no possibility of cultivating a natal soul. Only long-lived species like snakes and turtles had a higher possibility of cultivating a natal soul. In addition, some creatures like foxes and yellow-skinned animals that were born with a trace of natal soul qi also had a higher probability of cultivating a natal soul. After pondering for a while, I shook my head at Dai Nanzhou. Don't think of everything in a strange way. Barking like a dog is most likely a mental problem. Just send him to the hospital for treatment. Why did you come to see me? Ever since he was in university, he had always been a noisy person. Moreover, he was very interested in metaphysics. He liked to ask about strange things and make wild guesses. After listening to me, Dai Nanzhou became anxious. He said, "No, it's not that simple. My girlfriend is outside the hotel. Put down your luggage, and we'll go there. I'll ask Zhou Shi to tell you." Although I didn't think much of it, I still went to put down my luggage and followed Dai Nanzhou to the hotel's underground parking lot. His girlfriend was in his car. When I saw Zhou Xi in the car, my eyes brightened. This girl was more than one. 7 meters tall. She was fair and slender, and her facial features were exquisite. She looked like a celebrity. Dai Nanzhou was lucky to have found such a beautiful girlfriend. After Dai Nanzhou introduced us to each other with a smile, Zhou Xi generously reached out his hand from the front seat and shook my hand. Then he said to me, with a face full of curiosity, "Nanzhou always talks about how his buddy Zhou Yi was like in university. I've been rubbing it so much that calluses are about to form in my ears. I've always wanted him to introduce me to him, but who knew that after such a long time, there wouldn't be a suitable opportunity? We only met today." I smiled and chatted with her. I wanted to ask her about Lin Yuetong, but Zhou, she didn't seem to be in a hurry. He asked me, "I heard from Nanzhou that you had a female classmate in your university. She saw a little girl's soul in the toilet of the dormitory. She told me that it was really scary. She also said that you were the one who solved it. Is that true?" I was stunned and turned to look at Dai Nanzhou, who was sitting in the driver's seat. I was a little unhappy. Why didn't this guy watch his mouth? Why did he say everything to others? Dai Nanzhou seemed to notice that I wasn't happy. He explained awkwardly, "Zhou, she likes ghost stories. I used to tell her ghost stories to trick her." After the two flirted for a while, Zhou, she asked me about Su Ziyu. I didn't want to talk about it, so I casually answered her. Fortunately, I didn't hear Su Ziyu's name from what she said. Dai Nanzhou probably didn't tell her. This guy still had some sense and wasn't blinded by love. Fortunately, I didn't hear Su Ziyu's name from her words. It was likely that Dai Nanzhou didn't tell him. That fellow was still rational and hadn't been blinded by love. Su Ziyu has become a famous celebrity ever since she participated in a talent show in university. I occasionally hear about her on the news. As a public figure, if what happened back then were to be exposed, it would definitely affect Su Ziyu's future. That's why I was unhappy just now. After getting out of the car, I found out that Zhou Xi's university was an art university. No wonder she looked like a celebrity and behaved naturally. It turned out that she was studying at a celebrity preparatory school. It was no wonder why she looked like a celebrity and behaved naturally. It turned out she was studying at a celebrity preparatory school. I turned to look at Zhou Xi's face. I didn't know much about physiognomy, but I could tell at a glance that Zhou Xi's Fulu Palace wasn't a good place. Even if she had some achievements in her career, she wouldn't be able to achieve much. In other words, she couldn't become a superstar. Anyway, it was good. Dai Nanzhou seemed to be obsessed with her. If she couldn't become a superstar, the two of them could continue their relationship. If she became a superstar, Dai Nanzhou would have a tragic ending. On the way to the university, Zhou Xi's face turned gloomy. He told me about Lin Yuetong's situation. It was just as Dai Nanzhou had said. Lin Yuetong suddenly started barking like a dog in the middle of the night. She looked sluggish and didn't recognize anyone. Zhou Xi knew that something was wrong. He hurriedly called Lin Yuetong's mother. After anxiously explaining the situation, Lin Yuetong's mother was very calm. It was as if she had already known about this. She directly told Zhou Xi not to contact the hospital. Then, she asked him to pass the phone to Lin Yuetong. Zhou Xi didn't understand, so he put the phone in Lin Yuetong's ear. However, Lin Yuetong was very resistant. She struggled and barked like a dog while using her hand to call the other side of the phone. Zhou Xi talked to Lin Yuetong's mother. Lin Yuetong's mother told him not to worry about Lin Yuetong and to force her to listen to the phone. Then, the girls in Zhou Xi's dormitory grabbed Lin Yuetong's arms and legs and tied her up. Then, Zhou Xi put the phone in Lin Yuetong's ear. No one knew what Lin Yuetong's mother said on the phone, but after a few minutes, Lin Yuetong finally stopped barking like a dog. Instead, she began to wail loudly, but there were no tears on her face. She just kept letting out hysterical and uncontrollable cries. This time, Zhou didn't know what to do. He braced himself and continued to put the phone in Lin Yuetong's ear. This situation lasted for more than 20 minutes. Lin Yuetong finally stopped. She stopped barking and quietly curled up on the bed. Her body twitched from time to time. Zhou heaved a sigh of relief. He took the phone back and listened to it. Lin Yuetong's mother's voice was very strange. She kept chanting something that sounded like Buddhist scriptures. After Zhou said that Lin Yuetong's condition had temporarily stabilized, Lin Yuetong's mother asked her to take care of her. Then, she said that she would think of a solution and hung up. After that, Lin Yuetong lay on the bed and gradually fainted. There was no news from Lin Yuetong's mother. When the sun rose, Zhou called Lin Yuetong's mother again. However, no one answered. The girls in the dormitory discussed for a while. They wanted to send Lin Yuetong to the hospital first. However, Zhou remembered what Lin Yuetong's mother said and insisted on not sending her to the hospital. Then, he contacted Dai Nanzhou. In the next 2 days, Lin Yuetong was in a coma. He couldn't get through to her home phone. Dai Nanzhou's team couldn't find me either. Both of them were in a terrible situation. After listening to Zhou's explanation, I became serious. It seemed things weren't as simple as I had thought. Although Buddhists weren't the same as geomancy masters, they were still orthodox. Buddhist scriptures had a strong power to expel evil spirits. According to Zhou, Lin Yuetong's mother's chanting of Buddhist scriptures could calm her down. It proved that Lin Yuetong's strange behavior wasn't as simple as a mental problem. As for the specific situation, I couldn't tell until I saw her in person. I needed to observe her face to be sure. I didn't ask further and followed Zhou to her dormitory. I thought that it wouldn't be easy to enter the female dormitory. However, Zhou's school seemed to have a loose management system. Dai Nanzhou and I followed her. No one came out to manage the dormitory. When we arrived at the dormitory, I observed the place before entering. There was no energy in the room. It looked normal. I saw Lin Yuetong. It was just as Zhou had said. She was lying on the bed, still unconscious. Her breathing was weak, and her body would convulse every half a minute. I observed Lin Yuetong for quite a long time. Except for her weak soul, everything else was normal. I didn't see anything strange. Chapter 104. Little Red. Zhou asked in confusion. He followed the direction my finger pointed and looked carefully for a few seconds before he found the very inconspicuous little red dot. I don't think so, Zhou said uncertainly. This red dot is too inconspicuous. No one would stare at people normally. I nodded, but I was even more confused. The space between the eyebrows was where the soul resided. Inserting needles here would greatly affect the soul. Some unorthodox metaphysical sects would insert needles in the space between the eyebrows when using sorcery on people to split and scatter the soul. Did Lin Yuetong offend someone from the metaphysics world? But she was just a university student. How did she get involved with people from the metaphysics world? Also, I couldn't explain the behavior of barking like a dog. There were many ways to harm people in the metaphysics world, but I've never heard of such a situation. This matter was very troublesome. If Lin Yuetong was still conscious or could contact her family, then we should be able to get some valuable clues and slowly solve the mystery. But now there were no clues, and I had no idea where to start. After thinking about it, I decided to try using a special talisman recorded in death scripture. This talisman was called Soul-Seeking Talisman. Its actual use was similar to the soul-searching seal I saw Zhao Yongquan use before, but the soul-searching seal was more domineering. It forcefully searched for information from the soul, while the soul-seeking talisman allowed the unconscious soul to temporarily possess human thoughts and then communicate with people. In terms of effect, the soul-searching seal was much better than the soul-seeking talisman. If I wanted to know something, I just had to search the soul. It was simple and effective. Unfortunately, the hand seal could only be used after reaching the pressure point realm. I couldn't use it at all right now, so I could only use the soul-seeking talisman instead. But then again, the soul-seeking talisman also had benefits that the soul-searching seal didn't have. The soul-searching seal could only be used on weaker souls. For example, a feng shui master in the pressure point realm couldn't use the soul-searching seal against a feng shui master in the glory of consciousness realm, because if he used it, he would definitely be devoured. However, the soul-seeking talisman didn't have this problem. Even if it was the soul of a heavenly master, I could use the soul-seeking talisman to communicate, but whether or not the soul was willing to talk to me was not something I could control. The soul-seeking talisman is a very unorthodox talisman, and I have never made one before. Now that I need to use it, I can only make one at the last minute. I asked Dai Nanzhou to contact his uncle, Wang Yongjun, asking him to send me the wolf hair brush, cinnabar, and yellow talisman paper I needed to make talismans. Ever since I helped Wang Yongjun deal with the Miao girl Zhao Ying's matter and agreed to work in his company, Wang Yongjun's attitude towards me had been very good. The hotel directly booked a 1-year stay for me and even paid me half a year's salary in advance. If there was anything, I just had to call him, and he would definitely be more attentive than me. Less than half an hour after Dai Nanzhou made the call, the sound of a speeding car came from downstairs. I went to the balcony and saw a black Mercedes-Benz MPV parked under the dormitory. Wang Yongjun and the driver that picked me up a few times last time got out of the car together. Dai Nanzhou hurriedly ran downstairs and brought Wang Yongjun and the other man back to the dormitory. I was flattered to see Wang Yongjun. He had a dozen or so electronics factories under him with tens of thousands of workers. He was very busy every day, but he actually personally came to deliver something to me. I quickly walked over to take the paper bag from his hands and said, "Boss Wang, you could have just sent someone over. Why did you personally come?" Wang Yongjun laughed heartily. I had nothing better to do. At the last exchange meeting, I sat in the guest seats and personally saw Master Zhou take 2 first places. I was extremely happy at the time. I knew that Master Zhou's cultivation realm wasn't shallow, but I didn't think that Master Zhou would be able to suppress a province and take first place. Afterwards, I thought about it and realized that the annual salary I gave you before was too low. After today's matter, I'll have Xiao Zhao bring you another contract. I'll raise your annual salary to 5 million. His words made me feel embarrassed. Before, he still called me younger brother Zhou, but now that I was in the limelight at the exchange meeting, he directly called me Master Zhou. I wryly smiled and said, "I'm Nanzhou's classmate, and you're my elder. I can't accept being called that. Just call me younger brother like before." After much persuasion, Wang Yongjun finally changed the way he addressed me. Afterwards, he sighed with emotion and praised me. It seems that younger brother Zhou is not only skilled, but also modest. There aren't many youngsters with your temperament. During this small talk, I originally wanted to decline the matter of the annual salary increase, but now that I didn't have the chance to say it, I simply didn't say anything. With Wang Yongjun's net worth, there wasn't much difference between 2 million and 5 million. Next, I took out the tools from the paper bag and prepared to make talismans. Wang Yongjun understood the taboo of a feng shui master. He didn't need me to say anything and called Dai Nanzhou and the others to leave, leaving me alone in the dormitory. I went to the balcony. outside to wash my hands before returning. I spread out the yellow talisman paper and silently chanted the tranquil heart incantation. When a feng shui master makes talismans, they must be sincere. Moreover, they must clean their hands, body, and heart. In this way, they can draw in Tao Qi and create talismans with miraculous effects. After busying myself for a while, a brand new soul inquiring talisman was made. After I called Wang Yongjun and the others in, they all had a curious expression on their faces. They stared at the talisman on the table without blinking. Dai Nanzhou curiously asked me about the use of the talisman. Before I could open my mouth, Wang Yongjun helped me. Nanzhou, don't ask. This little girl has been unconscious for 2 or 3 days. Let's first see how younger brother Zhou will save her. As for the use of the talisman, won't you see it in a moment? After saying that, he turned his head and asked me, Younger brother Zhou, can we save her now? I shook my head and said, There's no rush. I still need something else. I'll have to trouble Uncle Wang to help me find a few eggs. I don't want the eggs from the farms sold in the market. I want the free-range eggs from the countryside, the ones that have been fertilized. Many people who grew up in the city might not know that there were 2 types of eggs. One was fertilized, and the other was unfertilized. In the past, a classmate of mine made a joke. On a whim, he wanted to study how to hatch chicks, so he bought a bag of eggs from the supermarket. After returning to the dormitory, he covered the bag with a blanket to hatch it in the middle of the summer. In the end, a few days later, this guy was dumbfounded. The chicks didn't hatch, and instead, the dormitory was filled with the smell of rotten eggs. When I heard about this, I almost laughed myself to death. Even if this guy gave the eggs to an old hen, he still wouldn't be able to hatch chicks. The reason was simple. These eggs weren't fertilized. Many people may take it for granted that hens can only lay eggs after being fertilized, but in fact, there is no need for a rooster. Hens can lay eggs on their own, but the eggs they lay are unfertilized eggs. After mating with a rooster, the eggs that are laid are fertilized eggs that can be hatched into chicks. This small matter was naturally not difficult for Wang Yongjun. Soon, he asked someone to get some free-range eggs. He also specifically asked the egg seller to contact the chicken farmers. After confirming that the eggs were laid by free-range chickens, he sent them over. After getting the eggs, I picked out a relatively round one and lightly knocked a small hole on the corner of the table. Then I walked to the sink outside and shook off the egg white and yolk bit by bit. Afterward, I poured water in and rinsed it a few times to make sure there was nothing left inside. After doing all of this, I rolled the soul inquiring talisman that I had just made into a thin roll and slowly stuffed it into the eggshell, leaving only a corner outside. Chapter 105. Dai Nanzhou and the others looked at me curiously. At this time, Zhou couldn't help but ask, Brother Zhou, what's the use of this egg? I smiled and said, Don't look down on this egg. In our profession, an egg, especially a perfectly round egg, represents Tai Chi, the egg white, and the egg yolk represent the primal chaos of yin and yang. A person's soul is in chaos and doesn't have a consciousness. Only through this egg can we communicate with it. You can use this egg to communicate with a person's soul? Dai Nanzhou's eyes were filled with disbelief as he asked. I shook my head. It's not enough to rely on this egg. We need this soul inquiring talisman. Then I didn't explain further and placed the egg between Lin Yuedong's eyebrows. The egg was perfectly round, and a person's forehead was flat. Normally, the egg wouldn't be stable. However, after I let go, the perfectly round egg stood upright and didn't move an inch. The curiosity in the eyes of the surrounding people became stronger. After everything was done, I asked Dai Nanzhou and the others to close all the doors and windows of the dormitory. I also covered all the curtains. The originally bright dormitory room instantly darkened. I found a candle, lit it, and placed it on Lin Yuetong's bedside. You can stand here and watch. However, without my permission, don't talk or take deep breaths. I reminded them. After Wang Yongjun and the others heard me, their faces became solemn. They nodded and promised me that they wouldn't talk. I stretched out my hand and gathered my Tao energy to touch the hole in the eggshell. Then I opened my mouth and read, "Ask the spirit and open the spirit, ferry the soul and the person." 3 souls return to their original position. Lin Yuetong, do you know why you are unconscious? After I said that, everyone's eyes gazed at Lin Yuetong. However, she was still lying there without moving. It seemed that she didn't have any reaction. Asking the spirit required time. I had to use my Tao energy to temporarily open the spirit of Lin Yuetong's soul. Only then would she respond to me. I wasn't in a hurry at all. I sat there and waited quietly. On the other hand, Dai Nanzhou and the others were affected by the quiet and solemn atmosphere in the dormitory room. Everyone's breathing became heavy, which was very clear in the quiet room. I knew that they probably didn't have anything to fear, but that was how people were. Their emotions were easily influenced by their surroundings. That was why I had warned them not to breathe too deeply. However, they were standing far away from Lin Yuetong. As long as they didn't breathe directly at Lin Yuetong, it wouldn't affect her too much. I wasn't too worried. Around 7 or 8 minutes later, the candle by Lin Yuetong's bedside table suddenly flickered. A cold wind came out of nowhere and blew a few strands of Lin Yuetong's hair. Feeling the cold wind, I felt happy and looked at Lin Yuetong's face. What's wrong with me? Lin Yuetong's lips didn't move, but a timid woman's voice arose. It sounded a little illusory. "You're in a coma. I used a talisman to temporarily open the spirit of your soul. Now, your soul is communicating with me. You don't need to be afraid. Tell me why you're unconscious." After I asked, the timid woman's voice disappeared. She didn't say anything for quite a long time. Just as I was getting impatient, the voice arose one more time. She hesitantly said, I'm not possessed. I've been like this since I was a child. Every few years, I would suddenly bark like a dog in my sleep. After that, I would fall into a coma. I went to see a doctor, and the doctor said that I have a fetish for mimicry, which is accompanied by epilepsy. Fetish for mimicry? Epilepsy? I frowned. If Dai Nanzhou had told me this before, I would have believed her. However, her mother had chanted Buddhist scriptures to her, and her weak soul had told me that it wasn't that simple. I said in a low voice, "Lin Yuetong, you've been in a coma for 3 days. Your soul is very weak, and something bad could happen at any time. Moreover, I can't contact your family. If you don't tell me the truth, I won't be able to help you if something bad happens. You should think about the consequences yourself." The voice went silent. Around half a minute later, she said, "Actually, my symptoms are related to my family's factory. However, I don't know if I'm possessed or not." Lin Yuetong finally opened her heart. I exhaled in relief and quietly listened to her story. Lin Yuetong wasn't a native of Shenzhen. She was from Yulin City, which was located in the southeast of Guangxi. Yulin City had a long history, and it was known as the Dog Forest in ancient times. There was a local proverb that said, "Fish is raw during the winter solstice, and dog is eaten during the summer solstice." Thus, when the summer solstice arrived, the local people would eat dog meat and eat lychees. Gradually, it became a custom, and there was a festival called the Yulin Lychee Dog Meat Festival. The local custom of eating dog meat was very popular, and there were many proverbs that mentioned it. For example, after eating dog meat, Don't cover yourself with a blanket. Rolling dog meat 3 times. Even the gods can't stand still. Dog meat is fragrant. Buddha jumps over the wall. Dog on the summer solstice. Dog has nowhere to go. Fish is raw during the winter solstice. Dog on the summer solstice. How many delicacies are there in a year? And so on. In recent years, the annual lychee dog meat festival in Yulin caused a large number of dogs to be slaughtered. People from all walks of life denounced and opposed this event. Some people even called it the Yulin slaughter incident. Since the local dog meat was consumed a lot, many related industries were created. Lin Yuetong's father operated a local slaughterhouse, which specialized in slaughtering dogs. Mr. Lin had entered the business early. More than 20 years ago, before Lin Yuetong was born, he had already operated this slaughterhouse. He lived there until he got married and had children. In other words, Lin Yuetong was born and raised in this slaughterhouse. According to her, when dogs were killed in the slaughterhouse, some dogs would always let out violent screams before they died. When she was still a baby, she was awakened by the screams of a dog when she was sleeping. At that time, she became stupid. After finding someone to take a look at her, they said that she had lost her soul. Then, her parents found someone to help her call her soul. Gradually, she got better. But from then on, every once in a while, Lin Yuetong would inexplicably bark like a dog in her sleep. Then, she would become stupid and wouldn't recognize anyone. At the same time, her whole body would twitch and she would fall into a coma. The symptoms were exactly the same as this time. At that time, her parents took her to see a doctor, and also to Yin Yang Xian. The doctor said that she had epilepsy and mimicry, while Yin Yang Xian said that when she was a child, she didn't call back her own soul. Instead, she called back the soul of a dog, which was why she got this strange disease in the future. Both sides said different things, but the same thing was that there was nothing they could do about her illness. Later on, when her mother took her to a temple to pray to Buddha, she accidentally heard some Buddhist scriptures. That was when she calmed down and gradually got better. From then on, her mother bought a lot of Buddhist scriptures and read them silently every day. When she had an attack, she would read them to her. It was very effective every time. But this time, she didn't know why she was in a coma. After listening to her, I vaguely understood. However, I didn't agree with her. When she was a child, she was scared by a dog's barking and lost her soul. Then, she called for a dog's soul. It was impossible if she didn't know anything about geomancy. The result of my consideration was that her mother had been affected by the resentful energy in the slaughterhouse when she had been pregnant with her. Lin Yuetong, who had been in the womb at that time, was at the stage where her 3 souls had formed, just like Tong Tong. The difference was that Tong Tong died when his 3 souls were formed, but Lin Yuetong was affected by the dog soul that was full of resentment when her 3 souls were formed. There were some dog souls in her soul, which led to the later symptoms. After understanding all this, I sighed with emotion. When it came to eating dog meat, different people had different views. It was hard to say whether it was right or wrong. However, even if it was a slaughterhouse, they had to pay attention to the way they handled the animals. Chapter 106. There were still a lot of mysteries surrounding Lin Yuetong, but I couldn't get anything out of her. I thought for a while, and decided to let her soul go back to rest. Then I asked Wang Yongjun and the others to leave the dormitory first. Then I called Tong Tong out of the jade bracelet. Although there were still some doubts that hadn't been solved, it was good to know that Lin Yuetong's illness was in her soul. With a direction, everything would be much easier. Tong Tong was at Yin's soul. Moreover, she cultivated the art of godhood, so her understanding of souls was much deeper than mine. It was more suitable for her to deal with Lin Yuetong's problem. As soon as Tong Tong came out, she pulled my arm and said with a smile, "Gidge, I've learned the method to communicate with you that I told you last time. Next time, when you want to talk to me, you just need to think about it, and I'll know." I remembered what Tong Tong had told me last time. I was happy. It would be much more convenient now. I didn't expect that the art of godhood that Tong Tong cultivated was even more magical than the Taoist techniques that I had learned. I wanted to try it, but Tong Tong said that I needed to give her a drop of blood. She had to go through a certain ritual first. I took a drop of blood from my finger and was about to ask Tong Tong how to use it. However, before I could open my mouth, Tong Tong walked toward my finger, opened her mouth, and put my finger in her mouth. She gently sucked on my finger before letting go of my finger. She smiled and said to me, "Gidge, it's done. You can try it now." I suddenly had a strange feeling in my heart. Although Tong Tong was a een soul, she could grow. When I first met her, she was still a little girl. However, after 4 or 5 years, she had grown a lot taller. According to her age, she should be 12 years old now. Although she had called me Gidge, I had always treated her as my daughter in my heart. But now, as I watched her grow up, I no longer treated her as my daughter. Thinking about this, I frowned and couldn't help but laugh. I shook my head to get rid of this strange thought and tried to use my thoughts to communicate with Tong Tong. My heart skipped a beat. I wanted to ask Tong Tong to help me think. As soon as I finished thinking, Tong Tong giggled and said, "Silly big brother, can't you think of something more complicated? Say something to me, and then I'll answer you." This little girl dared to tease me. I immediately said to her in my mind, "Then cry for me to see." Tong Tong's voice echoed in my heart. "Humph, bad Gidge, I won't cry. I can really communicate. It's no different from talking to me." I was full of interest and tried for a long time. Eventually, my curiosity had worn off. I told Tong Tong about Lin Yuetong and asked her to find a way to remove the impurities in Lin Yuetong's soul. The resentment in her soul was tainted when her soul was just formed. It had long since become a part of her soul. Although I have a way to remove it, doing so will inevitably harm her soul. I can swallow the part of her soul that has a problem. Then I will give her a part of my soul to make up for it. Although I have a way to remove it, it will inevitably harm her soul. After Tong Tong listened to me, she knew the risk of removing her soul. She tilted her head and thought for a while. Then she said, "I can swallow the part of her soul that has a problem. Then I will give her a part of my soul to make up for her soul. That way, she will be fine." I was surprised and asked her, "Use your own soul? How can you do that? Can't you use other souls? There are so many spirits in the jade bracelet. Can't you use theirs?" Tong Tong shook her head. "It's the same as the dog's soul. If I use other spirits, her soul will still be impure. Perhaps something like this will happen again. Only if I cut out a part of my soul and erase all the imprints on it to make up for her soul will there be no more problems." Then Tong Tong smiled and comforted me. "Brother, don't worry. I just need to swallow some other spirits to make up for my soul. It won't be a problem." Although she said that, I knew that Tong Tong was a spirit, and her soul was her everything. Cutting out a part of her soul would have a big impact on her. It wasn't something that could be made up for by just swallowing a few spirits. With that in mind, I didn't agree to let Tong Tong take such a risk. However, Tong Tong objected to my decision. She insisted on giving Lin Yuetong her soul. She even threw a little tantrum. I sighed inwardly. Many years had passed, and Tong Tong had even started to swallow the spirits in the jade bracelet at my request. However, her heart hadn't changed. She was still so kind. In the end, I couldn't argue with her and had to agree. Tong Tong's tears turned into a smile. She happily went to give Lin Yuetong her soul. However, after she started to give her soul, she couldn't smile anymore. Swallowing a part of Lin Yuetong's soul and giving it to her to make up for her soul wasn't a big deal. However, cutting a part of her soul from her body was an extremely painful process. Tong Tong was a part of her soul. Cutting a part of her soul was like cutting a piece of flesh from her body. Moreover, it wasn't just a small piece, but an arm or a leg. How could it not be painful? I looked at Tong Tong, who was sitting there. Her body was constantly shivering. I hated that I couldn't bear this pain for her. However, I couldn't do anything about it. After persevering for about 10 minutes, Tong Tong finally removed a large gray, cotton-like object from his body. After this thing was taken out, Tong Tong's entire body became a lot more illusory. Her small face was abnormally pale and exhausted, but her painful expression disappeared. Instead, she revealed a heartfelt smile. She walked over and slowly pressed this part of the soul into the space between Lin Yuetong's eyebrows. After everything was done, she didn't even have the strength to talk to me. She forced a smile at me, then returned to the jade bracelet. After Tong Tong left, I looked at Lin Yuetong, who was lying on the bed. I couldn't feel happy, and I even blamed myself. I wasn't related to her, and I couldn't even get a reward. It was fine that I came to help her, but why did I have to involve Tong Tong? After cursing for a while, I calmed myself down and forced a smile. I opened the door to the dormitory and asked Wang Yongjun and the others to come in. After they came in, Zhou Shi looked at Lin Yuetong, who was still lying on the bed. He asked me skeptically, "Brother Zhou, why hasn't Yuetong woken up yet?" My mood was a little gloomy. I pointed at Lin Yuetong and said, "Just wake her up." Zhou Shi was elated. He gently pushed Lin Yuetong a few times. Sure enough, she woke up and slowly opened her eyes. Zhou Shi was so excited that he burst into tears. He hugged Lin Yuetong happily. Lin Yuetong had just woken up, but she didn't know what had happened. When her soul talked to me, she didn't have any memory of what had happened. After Zhou Shi told her what had happened, Lin Yuetong's face changed. She panicked and wanted to call her family. However, the result was the same as before. She couldn't get through. This time, Lin Yuetong didn't care about her weak body. She got off the bed and anxiously said that she had to go home. Dai Nanzhou and Zhou Shi hurried to persuade her. In the end, they agreed to accompany her to her home. Lin Yuetong calmed down a little. After they had agreed, Dai Nanzhou came to me with a smile. "Do you have time?" He said that he wanted to help her to the end. He asked me to go with them to Lin Yuetong's house to solve this problem. There were still many suspicious points about Lin Yuetong. Moreover, Tong Tong had paid a big price to save her. Of course, I wanted to help her to the end. However, Lin Yuetong's house was in Guangxi. I didn't know how long it would take to go there. As for the Metaphysics Society, they were about to go there to observe the true dragon's vein. They didn't have enough time. Dai Nanzhou didn't know about this matter, but Wang Yongjun did. Without waiting for me to open my mouth, he stopped Dai Nanzhou and said, "Brother Zhou has something important to do recently, so he can't delay it. This matter can only be put aside for now. How about this? Nanzhou, I'll have little Zhao arrange a few people to go with you and see the situation first." After listening to him, Dai Nanzhou and the others nodded in agreement. However, I thought that this matter was related to the metaphysics. Even if Chief Wang arranged some people to go there, it wouldn't be possible to rely on ordinary people to deal with the situation. I called Yang Kaichen and briefly explained the situation to him. "Do you have time to go with Dai Nanzhou and the others?" Yang Kaichen and I hadn't known each other for a long time, and our age gap was quite big. However, Our friendship wasn't shallow. Of course, I didn't say anything and directly agreed. After settling this matter, Wang Yongjun forcefully dragged me to a banquet. He said that it was to welcome and send me off, and also to celebrate the fact that I had won 2 championships in the previous exchange meeting. He wanted me to attend this banquet no matter what. I couldn't refuse, so I agreed. Then Wang Yongjun called Yang Kai-chen and a few people he was familiar with in the metaphysics world. We went to a famous Chinese restaurant in Shenzhen and spent the whole night there. During the banquet, he gave me a new contract and increased my annual salary to 5 million renminbi. To be honest, after I had agreed to join his company, I hadn't done a single thing. Not only did I take the money, but I also had to increase my salary. I was embarrassed, but Wang Yongjun didn't say anything. He insisted on increasing my salary. In the end, I couldn't refuse, so I agreed. It wasn't until the early morning of the next day that I returned to the hotel in the car that Wang Yongjun had arranged for me. I drank a lot of wine at the banquet, but I didn't use my Tao energy to expel the alcohol. I was in a tipsy state, and my head felt dizzy. However, when I returned to my room, I lifted my head and sobered up. My room's door was open. While I was frowning, a woman's voice came from my room. Does this woman want to turn against me? In the dead of the night, there was no one else around. Her identity as the metaphysics colleague didn't restrict her at all. If she wanted to attack me, I wouldn't have any way to deal with it. Right now, the most powerful killing move I have is the spirits in the jade bracelet, but those spirits can only be controlled by my eyes. Tong's soul had been divided into many parts, so he was at his weakest. He could only stay in the jade bracelet to swallow souls to heal. He couldn't come out to help me. Moreover, even if Tong could come to help me, it was hard to say if those spirits could deal with this beautiful woman. When I first saw Zhao Yongquan, I thought that the glory of consciousness realm was just SOSO, but Yang Shilong's cultivation base broke my understanding. With the cultivation base that Yang Shilong had displayed, it was hard to say if those spirits could trap him, let alone Yi Pianpian, who Yang Shilong had to curry favor with. After thinking for a while, I finally admitted defeat and lowered my stance. I sighed and said, "Miss Yi, I don't know why you suspect that I'm not telling the truth, but I'm telling the truth about the true dragon's veins. I didn't hide anything." The fatty's father had already entered the fire god temple to save the fatty. No matter what, I definitely couldn't let the people from the Metaphysics Association delay this matter. Thus, I could only bite the bullet and lie. After saying that, I was a little scared and prepared for Yi Pianpian to attack me at any moment. However, the strange thing was that Yi Pianpian said to me, "It doesn't matter if you're lying or not. Tell me the whole story again. Tell it again. Is there something wrong with this woman?" Feng Shui masters have a good memory, especially someone with such a powerful cultivation. Last time, she asked me to explain it to her. Could it be that she still doesn't remember it? Does she need me to explain it again? I didn't understand what she meant, but I didn't have any other choice. I could only bite the bullet and repeat what I told her previously. Yi Pianpian sat there without moving and stared at me without blinking. She seemed to be listening very seriously. After I finished, Yi Pianpian moved her gaze away and looked outside the window. She asked me with a faint voice, "That's it?" I nodded. That's it. I was also a Feng Shui master that was about to step into the glory of consciousness realm. My memory was also very good. What I said this time was exactly the same as what I said to her last time. I thought that Yi Pianpian would be enraged or even attack me after hearing what I said. But strangely, she stood up from the sofa, turned around, and glanced at me. Then she walked away with light steps. She left directly. Even after her figure had completely disappeared, I still hadn't reacted. What did this crazy woman mean? She barged into my room in the middle of the night just to make fun of me? I thought for a long time, but I still didn't know what was wrong with her. However, no matter what, she didn't attack me, which was a blessing in disguise. This woman was too strange. She was fooled by me again. Who knew if she would suddenly feel that something was wrong and come back to find me? I quickly closed the door and inserted the safety latch. Although I knew that these couldn't stop her with her strength, it could at least give me a warning. I didn't sleep much for the rest of the night. I sat cross-legged on the bed and kept my guard up. However, that crazy woman didn't appear again until morning. It seemed that she had really left. I was confused and decided to put this matter to the back of my mind. I got up and washed my face. Then I ate breakfast in the hotel before heading to the Metaphysics Society. President Sue had told me that the time to observe the true dragon's vein would be in a few days. However, he didn't tell me what to pay attention to. Moreover, he hadn't finished the procedures to promote me to the vice president. Since I had nothing to do, I decided to go to the Metaphysics Society to handle the procedures. After being promoted to the vice president, I would be assigned an office in the Metaphysics Society. Although it was called an office, it was more like an apartment with a bedroom and a study room. People could live there. What happened to Ypiampian last night made me a little nervous. It wasn't safe to stay in the hotel. After finishing the procedures, I decided to move to the Metaphysics Society. The Metaphysics Society had a formation set up by the previous president. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to get in. Even if Ypiampian came back to deal with me, she was still a member of the Metaphysics Society. It wasn't a big deal if she attacked me outside, but inside the Metaphysics Society, she still had to care about her reputation. Just as I was on my way to the Metaphysics Society, I received a call from President Sue. He must have received the news that I was coming back. He called me to go and handle the procedures for the promotion. I hurried to the Metaphysics Society. When I reached the top floor, I was surprised to see President Sue waiting for me at the elevator. When I got out of the elevator, he was standing with his back facing the elevator door. He was looking at the place where the stone of Mount Tai had been placed. Ever since I used the jade bracelet to absorb the dragon's vein energy from the stone of Mount Tai, the Metaphysics Society had investigated for a long time. In the end, they couldn't find any valuable clues. They could only conclude that the dragon's energy on the stone of Mount Tai had been used up for a long time. Thus, the Metaphysics Society removed the stone of Mount Tai, leaving the place bare. It didn't look good, but this time there was a potted peach tree. It looked lush and green. I didn't know who did it. President Sue was looking at the peach tree. When I called him, he turned his head and expressionlessly looked at me. Come with me. I found it a bit strange. Although Chairman Sue's personality was usually rather cold, ever since I won the Double Champions title, his attitude towards me had become much better. When he spoke, he would even smile. Today, I came to handle the procedures for the promotion. No matter what, it was a happy occasion. Why did he have such a dark face? Before I could figure it out, President Sue had already walked back to his office. I could only follow him. When we reached the door of President Sue's office, I followed him. When I was about to say something, President Sue suddenly moved to the side. He walked past me and directly left the office. He even closed the door behind him. I didn't expect that he would do that. When I got a hold of myself, President Sue was gone, and the door to his office was closed. I felt a sense of crisis. But before I could react, an old voice came from the office. Was it you who killed my Ao Ying and took her Gu? The voice was hoarse and unpleasant. Moreover, the tone was strange. Although she was speaking Mandarin, it took me a long time to understand what she was saying. Then, Cold sweat flowed down my forehead. That Miao girl, Zhao Ying, had said that her mother would come to find me. After that incident, I had been very careful. I even joined the Shenzhen school selection branch because of this incident. From then on, no matter if it was getting in touch with President Su or trying my best to win the competition, it was all because I wanted the Metaphysics Society and President Su's protection. However, I didn't expect that President Su would betray me and bring me to this old goo woman. Chapter 108. After a few seconds of silence, I turned my head and looked at the chair that President Su used to sit behind the desk. Zhao Ying's mother, the old witch in front of me, had a strange, old, and hoarse voice. However, it was out of my expectation that she wasn't the white-haired old woman that I had imagined. Instead, she was around 50 years old. Although her hair was a little white, I could still see the charm of her youth on her face. What was even stranger was that the old witch didn't look like she had been through many hardships. She didn't have any terrifying aura, and she was wearing ordinary, outdated clothes. At first glance, she looked like a middle-aged woman who had just come to the city from the countryside. In fact, for a moment, I could even see some similarities between her and my mother. I shook my head and put President Su's matter aside. I tried to make my voice sound calm and said to her, "I'm very sorry about Zhao Ying's matter. There was a reason for it, so I didn't directly attack her. I just wanted to get rid of her goo. However, because I didn't know much about goo, I didn't know that her mother was the life goo. That's why I killed her." Zhao Ying had told me that even if I had the Goo King, I wouldn't be a match for her mother. After that, I analyzed her words. She must have mistaken the snake spirit for the king of venomous worms. That's why she said that. However, the serpent spirit was just a Yin soul, although it had the experience of turning into a flood dragon. And its power wasn't ordinary. The serpent spirit wasn't strong after it had become a Yin soul. At least, it wasn't as strong as the Goo King that Zhao Ying had mentioned. It wasn't a match for the old witch. Tong Tong was still recovering, and President Su had betrayed me. At this moment, I could only rely on myself. However, my power was too weak. If I fought against this old witch, I wouldn't have any hope of surviving. That was why I could only try my best to negotiate with her and hope that she could reason with me. The old witch's image was different from what I had expected. From her appearance, she didn't seem like a person that was hard to communicate with. However, what she said next shattered the last bit of hope I had. "I know what happened to Ying. It doesn't matter if you killed her by mistake or not. Just admit that you killed her." The old witch's face was calm, and her voice didn't fluctuate. It seemed she had just sentenced me to death. Then she continued, "I can no longer sense the aura of the Kirin Goo. It should be dead. Let me ask you again. How did you kill the Kirin Goo?" The magic compass and the snake spirit were all secrets that I had always kept hidden. But at this moment, in the face of life and death, there was no longer any meaning in keeping secrets. I kept silent for a while, then told her about the magic compass and the snake spirit. "Let me see your goo. Oh my God, it's the Qilin Goo again." The snake spirit couldn't believe it. Its giant black body jerked backward, as if it was scared. "Let me tell you something first. The Qilin Goo last time has nothing to do with me. If you want to take revenge, don't look for me. Just look for that kid." The snake spirit was scared. It didn't hesitate to throw me out to be its shield. However, the old witch's expression was strange. She looked at the snake spirit with a blank face. She looked even more shocked than the snake spirit. After the snake spirit had rambled on for a long time, the old goo woman slowly spat out 2 words. "Dragon goo. Dragon goo? What's that?" I was in great pain, and my consciousness was fading. I dizzily thought about the meaning of these two words. What dragon goo? I'm telling you, don't talk nonsense. I admit that I ate a small Chilingu, but it was a coincidence. That small Chilingu came to me and asked me to eat it. Do you think I wouldn't eat it? You can't treat me as a goo just because I ate your small Chilingu, right? Pooh, I'm a dragon, a real dragon. The old witch didn't care about the snake spirit. Her eyes were still fixed on the snake spirit. She mumbled to herself, a dragon goo that can form a Een spirit. How could it be? How could it be? After mumbling for a long time, the old witch seemed to have made up her mind. She opened her mouth and said, "It seems it's not a legend. It's real. Kid, I don't care how you got this dragon gooing spirit. You people from the Central Plains talk about fate. Although I'm from the Meow tribe, I believe in fate. I thought I would never have a chance. Who would have thought that I would meet you here? I wanted to kill you, but now I can't. I have to plant the Chilingu in you, the real Chilingu." Then the old witch walked toward me. She reached out her hand and lifted me to President Sue's desk. Then she took off her clothes in front of me. However, she only took off the dark blue robe that she was wearing on the surface, and then she stopped moving. Before I could react, blood gushed out of her mouth. Then she stooped and vomited blood. Each mouthful of blood landed on the dark blue robe she had taken off earlier. In the end, she even vomited pieces of dark red meat. It looked disgusting and strange. I didn't know how long she had vomited. Anyway, the dark blue robe was soaked in blood. It had a strange dark red hue, and there was a layer of sticky meat paste on it. After doing all that, she threw the robe in her hands onto me. The robe seemed to shrink automatically. After she threw it at me, it wrapped around me and shrank continuously. Chapter 109. I didn't know how long it had been, but my consciousness slowly returned from the endless darkness. The pain in my body had disappeared. I still felt a burning sensation, but it wasn't painful at all. Quite the contrary, it made me feel warm. After opening my eyes, I looked around. I wasn't in Vice President Sue's office anymore. I was in a lush forest. From the man-made benches and stone benches around, it seemed to be a remote park. Why am I here? It should be the old goo woman or Chairman Sue who threw me here, right? I struggled to move, but I didn't have any energy left in my body. I didn't even have the strength to lift my head. I decided to lie down and move the Tao energy in my body. While recovering my strength, I checked my body's condition. After a long time, my strength slowly recovered, but I still couldn't find anything wrong with my body. I could only give up on checking and slowly try to sit up. At this moment, I was still wearing the old insect woman's dark blue robe. However, the dark red color was gone, and the feeling of being wrapped around my body was also gone. After I sat up, I pulled on the robe and tried to pull it up. However, the dark blue robe was torn like a piece of paper. As soon as I pulled, I tore the robe apart and pulled it off my body. After taking off the robe, my clothes were also ragged. It looked like they had been worn for dozens of years. A pungent smell wafted into my nostrils and made me choke. How did it turn out like this? I felt strange. Before I fainted, although I was in pain, I heard the old insect woman say that she would plant a real Kirin insect on me. I also saw the disgusting flesh and blood she had vomited. However, I didn't feel anything strange on my body. Quite the contrary, my clothes were rotten. It can't be that the old goo woman planted a goo worm on my clothes, right? I thought it was strange. Then I decided to take off my clothes. As soon as I took off my clothes, I felt that something was wrong. There was a tattoo on my chest, on the left side of my chest. There was a strange beast head pattern that looked like a deer, but wasn't a deer. It looked like a lion, but wasn't a lion. A beautiful horn extended from my heart all the way to my collarbone. The beast head was slightly lowered, and the pattern was extremely clear. I could even see the fine spiral patterns on the horn. The beast's head was covered with silver-brown fur from head to neck, making it look exceptionally handsome. However, from my neck down, there was only a faint trace. It looked as though it was about to emerge from my body, but it hadn't yet. What is this? I lowered my head to look at it for a long time. Then I remembered the Kirin goo that the old witch had mentioned. Isn't this a picture of a Kirin's head? A lion's head, deer's antlers, tiger's eyes, an elk's body, dragon scales, an ox's tail, and a horn with meat. This was what the Kirin looked like in the records. Although I didn't have a body underneath, I could tell that it was a Kirin from the one-horned beast, head that looked like a deer, and a lion. Last time, I had seen Zhao Ying's Kirin goo, which had been eaten by the spirit snake. However, it was just a meaty worm. The old witch had given me a Kirin goo. Was it a Kirin? But even if it was true, I had never heard of a goo that could make a tattoo on a person's body. It was unbelievable. I sat there and pondered for a while. Then I lowered my head to look at it. The more I looked at it, the more I felt that it didn't look like a tattoo. This design was simply too perfect. It looked as if a living Qilin was imprinted on my chest. In fact, the only eye that could be seen was filled with disdain for the world. It gave off an indescribable aura. I couldn't understand it, no matter how I looked at it. I put this matter aside and wrapped my tattered clothes around my body. Then I stood up and left the place. After looking for a long time, I found out that this was a park in the downtown area of Shenzhen. It wasn't too far from the hotel I was staying at. I searched my body for a long time. Fortunately, although my clothes were tattered, my wallet, jade bracelet, and other things were still there. The only thing missing was the magical compass the old witch had taken. I took out all the money in my wallet and stood at the entrance of the park to call for a taxi. Probably because I looked like a homeless person, all the taxi drivers chose to ignore me. In the end, I had no choice but to wave a handful of money at them. Finally, one of them stopped. When I returned to the hotel, the staff didn't stop me. I had been staying here for a long time, and I went in and out every day. The security guards at the entrance knew me. However, there were other guests in the lobby. They gawked and dropped their jaws in shock. They watched me get into the elevator. After returning to my room, I took off all my clothes and went to the bathroom to take a shower. I felt much better after that. There was a big mirror in the bathroom. From the mirror, I could see the tattoo on my chest clearly. It was a tattoo of a Qilin's head. Moreover, it was terrifyingly exquisite. Every hair and every inch of the skin was perfect. It was as if someone had sprayed paint on my skin. It didn't look like a tattoo. I tried to gather the energy in my body into the area of the tattoo. In just a blink of an eye, the tattoo had absorbed half of my energy. I was startled. Then I took a closer look. The Qilin's neck, which used to be illusory, seemed to have become more solid. Moreover, some illusory dark blue skin had appeared underneath. I closed my eyes and carefully sensed it. Even if I didn't gather my energy there, the energy in my body would slowly gather there. Then it would gradually disperse. In just a blink of an eye, my heart became gloomy. I wasn't upset because my hard-earned energy was disappearing. It was because the Qilin tattoo was growing while my energy was disappearing. It meant that the energy in my body was constantly nourishing this Qilin tattoo. Was this the Qilin goo? It was constantly absorbing the energy in my body to strengthen itself. What would happen when the Qilin's body grew at night? I didn't dare to imagine, but I knew that nothing good would happen. What scared me even more was that my body and the energy in my body didn't reject the Qilin tattoo at all. It was as if this tattoo was a part of my body. I took out the jade bracelet. There was still thick dragon energy for me to absorb. Soon, I could replenish the energy in my body that had been absorbed by the Qilin tattoo. However, I hesitated whether I should replenish it or not. I even hesitated whether I should continue my cultivation path. As long as I continued to cultivate, the energy in my body would increase, and I would reach a higher realm in the future, and the Qilin tattoo would become stronger. The bigger it was, the more danger I would be in. Perhaps if I stopped cultivating, the tattoo wouldn't become stronger. Would I be safe? As soon as this thought popped up, I rejected it. Even if this method could suppress the Qilin tattoo, what if the old witch came looking for me again? No, passively running away wasn't a solution. I had to continue cultivating. The Qilin tattoo was getting stronger, and I was getting stronger as well. I had to find a way to deal with the Qilin tattoo before it was completely formed. Only then could I get rid of this problem. With that thought in mind, I took the jade bracelet and absorbed all the dragon energy in it into my body. Then I slowly replenished the energy that I had lost. Once the energy was replenished, my body would completely recover. Then I looked at the time. I should have only been unconscious for one night. I calculated the time. The team from the Metaphysics Society to observe the true dragon vein would be departing in the afternoon. I was now faced with a choice. Should I return to the Metaphysics Society? I don't know why President Su betrayed me, but since he betrayed me, there's no other possibility for the relationship between us. We can only be mortal enemies who can't live under the same sky. If I had the ability now, I would definitely make Chairman Su pay for his actions. However, I didn't have that ability. I could only consider whether he would harm me or not. After careful consideration, I decided to go to the Metaphysics Society. First, I had to go to the true dragon vein. Secondly, I still had the chief's seal. I didn't have the chance to use it against the old witch, but I felt that I had a chance against Chairman Su. After making up my mind, I got up and rushed to the Metaphysics Society. When I reached the top floor of the Metaphysics Society, the other 9 qualified people were already there. They were waiting for me. Chairman Su was the leader of the group. He was standing in front of the other 9 people. After seeing me, Chairman Su frowned. He seemed a little surprised, but he didn't say anything. When we went downstairs, he purposely stopped me and walked at the back. Then he explained to me what had happened yesterday. Just as I thought, the old witch was much stronger than him. After we found him, if he didn't bring me there, he would die. That's why he felt guilty and told me that he didn't have a choice. I smiled and shook my head. I didn't say anything, but I caught up with the others and went downstairs. I wasn't naive enough to think that he would feel guilty and do something to compensate me. On the contrary, if a guilty person didn't want to be tormented by guilt, the only way was to kill the person that made him feel guilty. Once he apologized, it meant that he was prepared to continue hurting you. He even used the term first vein geomaster. After all, a geomaster might even be able to obtain the top spot in the Young Phoenix Gathering. The Young Phoenix Gathering was a grand gathering for all the young feng shui masters in the country. Compared to it, the champion of the gathering was like a firefly. After hearing President Su's words, the faces of the other 9 geomancers of the Guangdong branch changed. Some of them even sneered and looked at me with hostility. The tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. After all, I'm the champion of the dragon seizing tournament, so it's normal for them to be hostile towards me. But right after that, a guy with an arrogant expression said coldly, "The Young Phoenix Gathering is based on talent. What's the use of having good feng shui knowledge? Our Metaphysics Association has never won the Young Phoenix Gathering after the Dragon Seizing Tournament's champion." I looked at this guy and vaguely remembered that he was from the Guangzhou branch. He was the last of the top 10 in this year's Dragon Seizing Tournament. It was no wonder that he was so hostile towards me, the champion of the Young Phoenix Gathering. You're right. Most young geniuses are more arrogant than ordinary people. It's hard for them to study feng shui. That's why they don't show their talents in the Dragon Seizing Tournament. But at the Young Phoenix Gathering, they might amaze the world. Unlike me, who has mediocre aptitude, I can only fight for the Dragon Seizing Tournament's championship. I hope that everyone will amaze the world at the Young Phoenix Gathering. There's no need to argue with this kind of unsophisticated youngster. I chuckled as I replied to him. Immediately, this fellow shut his mouth. His hostility towards me also decreased by a lot. However, the arrogant expression on his face increased a bit. It seemed that he really believed my words. But at that moment, Zhang Wenfei, who was standing not far from me, suddenly sneered and coldly said, "A full bottle doesn't move. A half bottle shakes. A full bottle doesn't move. A half bottle shakes. Su Shuxing, you've become more and more shameless these past few years." He seemed to be an old acquaintance of this person. His tone wasn't polite at all. This time, Su Shuxing exploded. He opened his mouth and said, "Zhang Wenfei, what do you mean by that? I think you're the half bottle. Why don't we compete again and see whose ranking is higher in the Young Phoenix Gathering?" Zhang Wenfei chuckled coldly. "When have you ever won against me? You still have the nerve to compete with me? You're really shameless." From his words, it seemed that the two of them had competed many times before. But in this Dragon Seizing Tournament, Zhang Wenfei's ranking was just below mine. Indeed, he was much higher than Su Shuxing. Su Shuxing was so angry that he was panting heavily. He jumped to his feet and said, "Fine, you tell us the rules now, and we'll have a duel. The loser will give up the right to observe the true dragon vein. Do you dare to accept?" This guy really had a firecracker's temper. He even dared to use this kind of thing as a bet. Everyone raised their heads and looked at him in surprise. But I wasn't too surprised. Although this guy wasn't shrewd, his strength wasn't bad. The Tao Qi in his body ranked second among the 10 of us. He was even slightly stronger than Zhang Wenfei. After reaching the Qi gathering realm, I was actually a level higher than the other 9. It was easy to see through their cultivation. Zhang Wenfei wasn't provoked at all. He chuckled again. Before reaching the pressure point realm, a geomancer can only use some talismans. What's important is talent, not strength. Do you think I'm as stupid as you, playing with my future and choosing such a meaningless method to compete with? With that, he continued to pick at the food in front of him with a calm expression. Su Shuxing was so angry that he couldn't speak for a moment. Finally, he said fiercely, "Then let's wait for the Young Phoenix Gathering. When the time comes, your ranking will be below mine. Let's see if you, Zhang Wenfei, still have the right to be arrogant in front of me." At this time, Chairman Su finally opened his mouth and comforted the two with a smile. Zhang Wenfei chuckled and didn't say anything. He only agreed to Su Shuxing's agreement, but in the end, he dragged me into the matter. He smiled and said that he wanted to compete with me. He even asked Su Shuxing if he dared to accept. Su Shuxing was proud and arrogant, so he naturally didn't put me in his eyes. He agreed without hesitation. It seemed that he was completely confident. I didn't say anything, which was a tacit agreement. In any case, I didn't mention the stakes. It didn't matter if I won or lost. Moreover, with Chairman Su here, I would definitely keep a distance from the Metaphysics Association after the Young Phoenix gathering. At the very least, I would leave the Shenzhen branch. At that time, I would have nothing to do with these two. It didn't matter if I won or lost. The noisy farewell party ended. In the afternoon, the Metaphysics Association's bus arrived and picked up the 11 of us. We set off for the capital. The Metaphysics Association's headquarters was in the capital. However, it wasn't in the city, but in the outskirts. Throughout the dynasties, the capital had always been the economic, cultural, and political center. Countless elites from all walks of life gathered here. However, there was one industry where the elites were further away from the capital. That industry was the Metaphysics Association. The dragon veins gathered in the capital, and a purple aura surrounded them. Under such an aura, it was hard for a feng shui master to keep his heart clear. Moreover, the capital was a big whirlpool, and feng shui masters were the guests of high officials. Once something happened, they would be dragged into it. However, that wasn't the most important thing. There was a rumor in the metaphysics world that said that there was a beast in the capital called the Heaven Eater. It fed on the lifespan of the metaphysics experts. This rumor was unbelievable, and no one had ever seen such a thing. However, there was one fact that no one could deny. The average lifespan of the metaphysics experts in the capital was only around 40 years old. It was unbelievable. Although no one believed in the existence of the Heaven Eater, they were still respectful of this rumor. This was also the reason why the Metaphysics Association's headquarters was located in the outskirts of the capital. After a whole night, we finally arrived at the capital the next morning. Originally, we thought that the headquarters was our destination. However, after we arrived, we rested for a day. Then, after the feng shui masters from all over the country had arrived, the Metaphysics Association organized us to travel together. Moreover, this time, all the feng shui masters from all over the country were scattered. Moreover, the team leaders couldn't follow us, and all communication devices couldn't be used. Moreover, every car had an old feng shui master with a profound cultivation. The only function of these feng shui masters was to disrupt the aura of the cars so that the feng shui masters wouldn't be able to tell the direction. There was only one purpose for such a strict method, and that was to protect the true location of the dragon veins. The true dragon veins were the core secrets of the Metaphysics Association and any other Taoist sects in the world. It was also the foundation that supported the existence of these sects and associations. Therefore, it was never too much to be cautious. Chapter 111. After getting off the car, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Those that could come to observe the true dragon vein were all young geniuses. However, the past 3 days had been like a prison sentence. Who had suffered like this before? Fortunately, after we got out of the car, the old geomancers in the car left one by one. They arranged for some ordinary people to receive us. They took us to a big manor and arranged for us to stay in different rooms, according to the list on the list. During this time, no one mentioned any rules to us. The strict atmosphere finally relaxed. However, there was still a strong magnetic field in the manor that made people unable to sense the direction. This wasn't the Metaphysics Association's intention. It was because of the true dragon vein. The true dragon vein itself had a strong magnetic field. It was just like when we arrived at the Yellow Springs River. The satellite phone couldn't be used because of the Fire God Temple's true dragon vein's magnetic field. The branches that were previously disrupted in the car gathered together in the manor and were divided into different areas. Our Shenzhen branch was divided into 5 rooms in the D area. According to the ranking in the dragon seizing competition, 2 people were assigned to a room. I was the champion. and Zhang Wenfei was the second. Naturally, the two of us were assigned to the same room. Coincidentally, the room's number was Ding Wu. It was the same name as Zhang Wenfei's master, Grandpa Zhao. Although the physique of a geomancer was stronger than ordinary people, I hadn't rested for 3 days in a row. After staying in the room, I was already very tired. Just as I was about to sleep, Zhang Wenfei pulled me over to chat and asked me if I had experienced any danger in the past few days. I was stunned, whether it was returning to the fire god temple or encountering the old, which they were all extremely dangerous. How did Zhang Wenfei know? Seeing that my expression wasn't right, Zhang Wenfei smiled and said, "Brother Zhou, don't misunderstand. Didn't my master and I go to remind you to be careful in the near future? A month has passed, and Brother Zhou is still as elegant as before. My master must have made an error in judgment." After he said that, I remembered what Grandpa Xiao had told me. However, I had been on guard for a few days. Later on, when we were in danger, I had forgotten what Grandpa Xiao had told me. Looking at it now, whether it was Nangong or Old Man Zhao, they were both reminding me about the old Gu woman. Back then, I thought that with the protection of the Metaphysics Association, I would definitely be able to get through this safely. After the incident, I was filled with regret. No matter what happened, I could only rely on myself. I shouldn't have placed all my bets on the Metaphysics Society and President Su. Now that I have a strange Qilin tattoo on my body, even I can't control my future. I shook my head with a wry smile. Grandfather Zhao didn't make a mistake. I did encounter something. Now that I think about it, I regret not taking Grandfather Zhao's words seriously. Hearing this, Zhang Wenfei's eyes lit up. He lowered his voice and asked, "What does Brother Zhou mean by that?" He didn't expect this guy to be so gossipy. I shook my head and didn't mention the Kirin parasite. I sighed and said, "It's a long story." Seeing that I wasn't willing to talk, Zhang Wenfei went back to his bed in disappointment. But not long after, he opened his mouth and told me about the Young Phoenix gathering. This time, I was interested. Although I was the champion of the dragon seizing tournament and was stronger than Zhang Wenfei, I hadn't been in the Metaphysics Association for a long time. Moreover, I didn't have any seniors to guide me, so I didn't understand a lot of common sense in the metaphysics world. Zhang Wenfei came from a prestigious family and joined the Metaphysics Association at a young age, so he knew more about this than I did. After talking with him, I found out that the Young Phoenix Gathering had started when the Metaphysics Association first publicized the true dragon vein. Just like the dragon seizing tournament, it was held every 3 years. It was already the 10th Young Phoenix Gathering. Many geniuses had appeared in the previous 9 Young Phoenix Gatherings. He mentioned a few names, but because they were all unfamiliar, I didn't pay much attention to them. But when he mentioned the last name, I couldn't help but be moved. I knew this person. It was Yi Pianpian. Moreover, according to him, Yi Pianpian had become famous during the Young Phoenix Gathering when she opened her meridians and acupoints. How was that possible? Yi Pianpian was already the vice president of the Metaphysics Association, and she was even stronger than Yang Shilong. She had only reached the Young Phoenix Gathering in the previous Young Phoenix Gathering. In other words, she had reached the peak of glorious knowledge from the acupuncture realm in just 3 years. This speed was simply terrifying. I asked Zhang Wenfei, how many meridians did Yi Pianpian open during the Young Phoenix Gathering? Zhang Wenfei's face blushed. His face was filled with admiration and adoration. After a while, he raised 3 fingers at me. 3 fingers. Legend had it that Eternal Spring Taoist Qiuchuji was also a 3-meridian Earth Master and had reached the Heavenly Master Realm. Moreover, The famous Zhang Dowling, who was known as South Zhang, North Kong, was only a 4 Meridian Earth Master. No wonder Yi Pianpian could reach the peak of glorious knowledge in just 3 years and become the vice president of the Metaphysics Association. It turned out that her talent was so terrifying, not to mention that she was stronger than Yang Shilong. Even the vice president of the Metaphysics Association, Yang Shilong, had to be polite to her when she revealed her talent as a 3 Meridian Earth Master. She was a true genius that only appeared once in 100 years. I was so shocked that I couldn't speak for a long time. However, Zhang Wenfei became a chatterbox next to me. He kept talking about Yi Pianpian with admiration written all over his face. In the end, he said to me complacently, "Brother Zhou, let me tell you, Yi Pianpian isn't just talented. She's also terrifyingly beautiful. I have a photo of her. Do you want to see it?" I was stunned, let alone a photo. I had even seen her in person several times. Moreover, although she was beautiful, she was as arrogant as a phoenix. She wasn't likable at all. What was so rare about her? That was what I thought, but I didn't want to expose the fire god temple. Of course, I didn't tell Zhang Wenfei about it. I just smiled and asked him, "How did you get the photo? Do you know Yi Pianpian?" Zhang Wenfei's face turned sour. "I'm not that lucky. I asked my senior brother, who's in charge of the association, to secretly take a photo of her." His answer stunned me. When this fellow talked about the water gathering the heavenly heart feng shui layout, he was also eloquent as if he was a talented young man. How come he was secretly taking photos of her now? He looked like a crazy fan who chased after a celebrity. I wiped my sweat. "Brother Zhang, you don't have to do this. If you want to see her, you'll have a chance sooner or later. You don't have to secretly take photos of her, right? Moreover, Brother Zhang, you're an outstanding young man. You might be able to amaze the world at the Young Phoenix Gathering. If you really like Yi Pianpian after the Young Phoenix Gathering, you should go to the headquarters and ask your senior brother to introduce her to you. You can take your time to pursue her. Who knows, maybe you'll have a good relationship with her." While I was talking, Zhang Wenfei was reaching for the jacket on the chair next to the bed to take out the photo. When he heard what I said, he fell off the bed with a plop. After a long time, he got up and said to me with a bitter smile, "Brother Zhou, you're really daring. That's Yi Pianpian, a 3-vein Earth Master. You might not even see one in a few hundred years. You're talking about a good fate. I'll be satisfied if I can see her twice in this life." Then he took out an inch-long photo from his wallet and excitedly showed it to me. "See, I was right. She's much prettier than those celebrities. I think she's the prettiest woman in this world." I lowered my head to take a look. It was an ordinary photo. However, Yi Pianpian was a natural beauty. The more ordinary a photo was, the more beautiful she looked. Although Zhang Wenfei was exaggerating, it wasn't unreasonable. She was much prettier than those celebrities. I pointed at a fatty with a warm face and asked Zhang Wenfei, "Zhang Kunlun, do you know him?" Zhang Wenfei lifted his head and said calmly, "He's Zhang Kunlun. He's Zhang Kunlun. Zhang Kunlun. He of the person. Of his head. He's Zhang," I said. "I asked Zhang, and Zhang to that of Zhang." I originally thought that I was the only one here who had reached the realm of drawing qi like a pillar by chance. I didn't expect that there would be another person here. It hasn't been long since I joined the Metaphysics Society, so I haven't heard much about it. Why is this fatty famous? I asked Zhang Wenfei as I stared at the fatty. Zhang Wenfei said calmly, "Of course he's from a good family. Didn't you see which section he was sitting in? Area A. Only the Shangxi Metaphysics Association and the Hunan Metaphysics Association can sit there. I was even more confused. What was wrong with Zone? What's so special about these two branches of metaphysics? After asking Zhang Wenfei, I learned that the seating arrangement of the Metaphysics Society was very particular. It was divided into 10 different levels. Since the establishment of the Metaphysics Society, only the Shaanxi Metaphysics Society and the Hunan Metaphysics Society could sit in the A area. Of course, Shaanxi and Hunan were actually Shi and Metaphysics Association and Luoyang Metaphysics Association. These two places were the cornerstones of their respective metaphysics societies. They occupied a large number of seats, and the other societies in the province couldn't compare. These two cities were the origin of Chinese civilization. They had thousands of years of civilization, especially Luoyang. The Book of Changes said, "The river has a map, and the Luo has a book." This meant that during Fushi's time, a dragon horse appeared from the Yellow River, carrying the river map. A divine turtle appeared from the Luo River, carrying the Luo book. Fushi used this map and book to draw the 8 trigrams. Later on, King Wen of Zhou used Fushi's 8 trigrams to create the One King's 8 trigrams and the 64 trigrams. That was the origin of the Book of Changes and Chinese civilization. Moreover, these two places were imperial capitals with thousands of years of history. They were places where the dragon veins of China converged. From ancient times until now, it could be said that there were many treasures and geniuses, especially in the field of feng shui. Some of the big feng shui families could be compared to famous sections. These feng shui families were the cornerstones of the metaphysics societies. Among these feng shui families, the Zhang family of Mount Mang and the Han family of Qinling were the most famous. Zhang Kunlun, the fat man I mentioned earlier, was a member of the Zhang family of Mount Mang. Not far from him was a tall man with a thick frame. He was Han Wennan of the Han family of Qinling. I followed Zhang Wenfei's finger and saw another man whose realm of Tao energy wasn't weaker than mine. Realms were a taboo topic, so I didn't continue to ask Zhang Wenfei about it. However, I guessed that these two families had some methods that outsiders didn't know about. It wasn't strange that they could train 2 disciples who had reached the Qi-gathering realm without going through the Metaphysics Society. After all, the dragon vein wasn't limited to the true dragon vein. For example, the Mount Tai stone in the Shenzhen Society could support a person to reach the Qi channeling realm after the true dragon vein was used up. After talking about the 2 metaphysics societies in Area A, Zhang Wenfei introduced the other societies in Area B and Area C. They were Beijing, Jiangsu, Shandong, and Jiangxi. These places were basically places where ancient civilizations gathered. Jiangxi and Shandong were the territories of the 2 big families of the southern Zhang and northern Kong. Although these 2 big families didn't have anything to do with the Metaphysics Society, with these 2 families teaching in these 2 places, it was reasonable that the Metaphysics Society was stronger than other places. Next up is our Guangdong branch, as well as the Shanghai branch, which is also in District D, followed by the Sichuan branch, Tianjin branch, and so on. Among them, other than the Chengdu branch, the other branches were all in the more developed areas in the modern era. Although their ancient legacies might not be as good as the branches above them, they had been catching up in recent years and were getting closer. The Sichuan branch was the most special. The ancient heritage here was not inferior to the other branches, but the strange thing was that this place was not covered by the civilization of the Central Plains. In ancient times, this place had its own unique civilization. Even now, although it had long merged with other places, in terms of the metaphysics world, this place was still incompatible with other places. Moreover, there was something hidden in the dark that shocked the entire metaphysics world. Of course, Zhang Wenfei himself did not know the specifics. He said that these secret histories were all told to him by Old Master Zhao. Although the Old Master was only an ordinary feng shui master, his attainments in feng shui were extremely profound, especially the preservation of ancient civilizations by the Hakka people. Old Master Zhao had a very deep understanding of ancient civilizations. Usually, he taught Zhang Wenfei a lot of things. Unfortunately, his virtuous and respectable master had taught a silly disciple who didn't even have a filter on his mouth. He didn't even wait for me to ask before he told me everything. After listening to Zhang Wenfei's story, I was shocked. It was just like what was recorded in the death scripture. Metaphysics wasn't just about metaphysics. Chapter 113. While I was chatting with Zhang Wenfei, a tall and skinny young man in the front row suddenly walked in front of Han Wennan from the Qinling Han group and said with an arrogant expression, "Han Wennan, it's time for us to settle the matter between us. During the Young Phoenix gathering, the one who opens the least meridians will withdraw. What do you think?" I couldn't help but look at them. These two were just like Su Shuxing and Zhang Wenfei. It was obvious that they had a grudge against each other and were using the Young Phoenix gathering as a wager. At this moment, Zhang Wenfei squeezed out two words with an unfriendly face. "Dog biting dog." I turned to look at him suspiciously. It was normal for this guy to have a grudge against someone like Su Shuxing. After all, they were from the Guangdong branch. However, they were worlds apart. Why did he have a grudge against Han Wennan, a member of the Qinling Han family? Before I could open my mouth to ask, Han Wennan spoke first. He coldly glanced at the tall and thin young man without any expression on his face. It was as if he was looking at an idiot. His mouth moved slightly before he spat out one word: "Scram." I was stunned. This guy looked honest and slow. I didn't expect him to be so arrogant. The tall and slender young man had walked over from the seats of the Beijing branch in Zone B. It was obvious that he wasn't an ordinary person, but Han Wennan didn't give him any face. The tall and slender young man went crazy. His face was ashen. He pointed at Han Wennan and shouted angrily, "Han Wennan, don't be too arrogant." After the Young Phoenix gathering, "Let's see if you still have the right to be arrogant. I'm telling you, Yi Pianpian belongs to me, Lu Xinyang. You should give up on her." After that, he angrily returned to his seat. I finally understood. No wonder Zhang Wenfei had called them dog biting dog. He was jealous of Yi Pianpian. After Lu Xinyang left, Han Wennan, who had been silent all this while, turned his head to look at Zhang Kunlun, who was not far from him. Although he did not say anything, anyone could tell what Han Wennan meant. In his eyes, only Zhang Kunlun was his opponent. The hall quieted down. The other members of the Metaphysics Association stared at Han Wennan. Zhang Wenfei forced a smile and said to me, "Brother Zhou, last night you asked me to pursue Yi Pianpian. It's not that I didn't want to do it, but look at who my competitors are." Han Wennan claimed that Yi Pianpian was hers 3 years ago. Although Yi Pianpian beat him up, he was from the Qinling Han family. Since he said that, he couldn't be joking. Now, the members of the Metaphysics Association think that they're a couple. There's also Lu Xinyang, a member of the Lu family in the capital. Although the Lu family isn't favored by the other feng shui families, the Lu family in the capital is the #1 feng shui family. But even so, Lu Xinyang only dared to use the Young Phoenix gathering as a bet to snatch a chance from Han Wennan. Why should I have those unrealistic fantasies? Up until now, Zhang Wenfei had always been either arrogant or heartless when he faced others. This was the first time I had seen his face filled with bitterness and helplessness, as well as depression. His words also made me feel sad. So, What if the Guangdong branch won 2 championships? This world is too big. Those true geniuses have probably never even glanced at us. Just like now, Zhang Wenfei and I were sitting behind them talking about them, but they didn't even look back. They didn't even know our names. After a moment of silence, a white-haired, black-robed old man suddenly walked into the hall. Then the entire hall quieted down, and everyone obediently sat in their seats. At first, I didn't know who he was. After he smiled and introduced himself, I knew that he was the current president of the Metaphysics Union, Gu Lilai. President Gu didn't have an oppressive aura, but he had an indescribable dignity. That was why when he entered the hall, many people quieted down, even though they didn't know him. Yang Shilong and Yi Pianpian were the vice presidents. They had reached the peak of geomasters. What about President Gu? Was he a celestial master? I looked at him and tried my best to see something different about him. However, I couldn't get what I wanted. Then, President Gu briefly announced the procedure. The true dragon vein would open tomorrow. At that time, different metaphysics branches would enter in a certain order. To determine the order, there would be a ranking competition. That was what was going to happen today. The true dragon vein would only open once every 3 years. After 3 years of accumulation, the dragon energy in the true dragon vein would be extremely dense. The first batch to enter would definitely have a huge advantage. As more and more feng shui masters entered, the dragon energy would gradually become fainter. Although it wouldn't become fainter by too much, it was a crucial period for feng shui masters. The slightest difference could result in a completely different outcome. No one was willing to take that risk. That was why there was this ranking competition. It was to let the top feng shui masters from each branch stand together and compete with their strength to determine the final order. Zhang Wenfei had already told me about this yesterday. However, I didn't pay much attention to it. On one hand, I didn't really care about the order of entry. It didn't matter if I was the last to enter. On the other hand, it was because this ranking competition was actually meaningless. The first few places would definitely be taken by the branches in Area A and B, while the last few places would be much weaker. There was no chance for them to advance. That was why the ranking competition was hastily decided based on the order of the Metaphysics Society. In the previous 9 ranking competitions, there had only been 5 fights, barely more than half of them. Moreover, most of them were in the first few competitions. In the last 3 competitions, everyone had given up on 2 of them. However, according to Zhang Wenfei's prediction, there would be a fight this time. It had nothing to do with who was the last. It was only related to Han Wennan, Zhang Kunlun, Lu Xinyang, and the others. They were all prodigies of their generation. They would definitely fight for the first place. Although I didn't pay much attention to it before, I suddenly had an idea. In terms of strength, everyone was still in the dragon luring realm. I was at the peak of the dragon luring realm. I didn't believe that I would be weaker than anyone. Han Wennan and the others had never looked back, but what if I defeated them and led the Guangdong branch to be the first to enter the true dragon vein? Would they be standing behind me and looking up at my back at that moment? As I thought about it, my heart beat violently, and I made my decision. Soon, President Gu gave a simple explanation and left the rostrum. He was replaced by another middle-aged feng shui master, who walked up to the rostrum with a smile and said, "The ranking competition can start now. Those who are willing to fight for a high position, please come to the rostrum together later. Also, those who don't wish to participate, I will explain the rules. Each branch will now have a ranking based on their seats. For those who are not participating, their seats will be the current temporary ranking. Those who are willing to participate can challenge the branch in front of them. As long as they win, they will take over the loser's position, and the other branch's positions will be pushed back. Does everyone understand? Everyone nodded to show that they understood the rules. Afterwards, it was time for those who were willing to participate to go up the platform. I hesitated for a moment before clenching my teeth and preparing to stand up. However, at that moment, Zhang Wenfei, who was sitting next to me, pulled me back. "Zhou Yi, I know that you don't care about this ranking, so I want to fight in your place. What do you think?" I was stunned. It was possible to let someone else fight in the champion's place. After all, most of the time, the strongest person wouldn't necessarily be the champion of the dragon season competition. In order to obtain a good ranking in the ranking competition, it was necessary to send out the strongest person. Thus, although the ranking competition was nominally for the champion, it was actually for the strongest person of each branch. Before I could reply, Zhang Wenfei said, "Han Wennan and the others will definitely have to compete in this competition. I know my talent. If I miss today, I'm afraid that I won't even have the chance to stand on the same stage as them. This is my last chance." Other than the top 3 branch chiefs and Zhang Wenfei, there were only 4 others. The smiling director, Song Xing, opened his mouth to confirm that no one else was willing to fight. Then he announced the start of the ranking competition with a smile. The first person to step forward was the honest-looking Han Wennan. He only said one sentence: "The Shangxi branch is ranked first. If you have any objections, feel free to look for me." It was a simple sentence with a bit of a Shangxi accent, but it revealed a domineering air of supremacy, causing everyone's momentum to stagnate. However, there were still some people who weren't scared. For example, Lu Xingyang. He seemed to have been waiting for this opportunity and was about to step forward. But before he could step forward, Zhang Wenfei spoke first. "The Guangdong Metaphysics Association wants to fight with you." As soon as his words came out, the whole audience was in an uproar. Originally, everyone was watching the people in Area A and Area B fight for the first place, and they didn't even consider the others. Even the few people standing on the rostrum, in everyone's eyes, were only fighting for the lower ranks. Who would have thought that Zhang Wenfei would come out of nowhere and fight for the first place? Before Han Wennan could speak, Lu Xingyang stood up first and said to Zhang Wenfei with a face full of disbelief, "Did your mouth say something wrong, or did your brain turn in the wrong circles? Stay on the side and don't meddle in things that you shouldn't meddle in." Zhang Wenfei said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "I was the one who challenged first. There has to be a first-come, first-served rule." Lu Xingyang curled his lips. "Forget it. Our Beijing branch's ranking is high. Even if it's first come, first served, it won't be your turn." The two continued to argue. At this time, Han Wennan became impatient and said with a frown, "You two fight first. The winner can come find me." Lu Xingyang clearly supported this idea. He impatiently waved his hand. "That's fine. Hurry up and come." Only Zhang Wenfei's face darkened. I knew that the reason why he insisted on fighting was because he wanted to fight with Han Wennan. Regardless of the outcome, he would be risking his life for himself. But who knew that he would be stopped by Lu Xingyang halfway? Only the two of us knew what he was thinking. Thus, this seemingly reasonable suggestion immediately gained the approval of Director Song Xing, who was in charge of the ranking competition. He asked the others to step down and left the rostrum to Lu Xingyang and Zhang Wenfei. Very quickly, Zhang Wenfei adjusted his thoughts. The gloomy expression on his face disappeared and was replaced with a solemn and persistent expression. He once again took out the thick Yama's brush. At this time, Lu Xingyang seemed to have heard about the Guangdong branch's news. He asked with interest, "You're the Guangdong branch's chief." I heard that you're the same as me. In this year's dragon seizing competition, you've also obtained 2 chief positions. I was stunned. I hadn't heard of this before. This guy had actually obtained 2 chief positions, like me. Zhang Wenfei was also stunned, but he immediately shook his head and said, "You're talking about Zhou Yi. He gave up the opportunity to fight this time. I'll fight in his place." TSK. Lu Xingyang let out a disdainful sound. He sounded a little impatient. "I originally thought that you'd obtained 2 chief positions like me, and wanted to let you go. Forget it then. Hurry up and make your move." Lu Xingyang's words and actions were very casual, but Zhang Wenfei was extremely serious. He didn't say anything else. He just picked up the Yama's brush in his hand and infused it with Dao Qi. In an instant, a dense cold qi emerged from the brush, while the tip of the brush below emitted bursts of explosive yang qi. Under the intertwining of yin and yang, it really looked like the yin-yang brush in the hands of the king of hell. Yin qi and yang qi emerged from the same brush, but strangely, they didn't neutralize each other. Instead, they collided with each other and emitted bursts of explosive sounds. It looked very powerful. Zhang Wenfei didn't hold back at all. As soon as he drew out the Dao Qi, he reached out and waved his hand. The yin and yang qi on the tip of the brush, and the brush rushed in Lu Xingyang's direction at the same time. At the same time, Lu Xingyang also took out something that looked like a seal from his body. Without making any movements, he casually threw it into the air. This huge seal did not look like much when it was thrown into the air, but when it fell, it looked the same as before. However, its aura skyrocketed. It felt like a small mountain was crushing down from the sky. It was surrounded by qi of the way, and it carried an incomparable might. I sighed, silently in my heart. Zhang Wenfei's Yama's brush was very strange. After the yin and yang qi collided, the power that was released was far more violent than his own Dao Qi. It could even be said to have exceeded his own strength. However, the Dao Qi in his body was too different from Lu Xingyang's. Although Lu Xingyang hadn't completely reached the level of qi drawing like Han Wennen and Zhang Kunlun, he wasn't far from it. As for Zhang Wenfei, the Dao Qi in his body was at best slightly stronger than qi drawing like a finger. There was no way to compare the two. The amount of Dao Qi became the decisive force. After Lu Xingyang's huge seal fell, it directly scattered the Dao Qi on the Yama's brush. Then, with its remaining power, it smashed towards Zhang Wenfei's body. Zhang Wenfei's expression changed, and he hurriedly took out another talisman. However, with his current realm, if it weren't for the fact that he had nurtured the Yama's brush since he was young, it would be difficult for him to control it.